Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for joining me today for the Pueblo Storytellers program. This is the first in a series of programs that we hope to bring you, brought to you by Special Collections and Museum Services Department at the Pueblo City County Library District. We're live here today at Rawlings Library. I'm Bree Pappen, one of the museum coordinators here at Rawlings. And I am very pleased to be joined by Jane Milne of the Pueblo Storytellers for a walking tour of mom and pop stores of Pueblo. Jane will explore the histories and stories and talk about some of the mom and pop stores of Pueblo that are so important to the heart of Pueblo and to have become pillars of the community for many, many years. Jane has been telling true history stories since 1970, often combining the storyline with auto harp music. They are based on real research of the era, and many characters that she interviews are real people and real residents of Pueblo. For the past 10 plus years, she's led the Pueblo Library District Pueblo Storytellers group every Monday afternoon at Rawlings Library, and all ages are welcome to participate and listen when those groups start meeting again. After Jane's presentation today, we are live, so we would love to welcome any comments or questions that you have. So I invite you to please type them into the comments bar, and shortly after Jane's presentation, we would love to entertain them. So I'm happy to present Ms. Jane Milne from the Pueblo Storytellers. Jane.
Thank you, Bree. I appreciate the introduction, and I'm really delighted to be here to share the Ma and Pa stories. It fits in so well with the 150th anniversary for the beginning of Pueblo back in 1870. And as you will see, some of these stories came and stores came very soon after that. All right, come along with me now. We're going to go over to Sweeney's feed mill. I pulled up in front of the building. It's over across on 4th Street. There was a big sign on the door. It said closed, going out of business. I had just been there about 3 or 4 months earlier to get my 40-pound bag of bird seed, and I was wanting to do that again today, but that wasn't going to happen. But because I had had such a special experience at Sweeney's when I was there last time, I wanted to share a little bit of that with you. I pulled in on a slopey kind of a drive, and they say that below that is the dungeon. I opened the door, and the smell of farm, ranch, feed, oh my goodness, it just was such a good old country kind of smell. And I'm looking around, and a very nice man by the name of Dan was working behind the counter that day. And so I said, I told him what I wanted, the 40-pound bag of birdseed. And then I said, how did this business get started? And he said, well, Mr. Sweeney came in 1896, and he first located over on 1st and River Street. He was very wise to move his business because when the 1921 flood came rushing through Pueblo, his business would have been wiped out. And so Dan said to me, you seem to have a lot of questions and interest about the business. He said, I'm on my lunch hour. Would you like me to take you around and show you? And I said, oh, yes, that would be wonderful. He said, well, let's start. Let's get on the elevator. We get on this rickety elevator. The boards are wide and there's spaces in between, and there are no sides to the elevator. Oh my, it was quite an experience. I thought I was going to fall off before we got to the 4th floor. Got up there, and he explained that it's a series of big pipes that they blow the raw material up into the fourth floor, and then through a process of grinding and whatever, they have created the feed for the pigs or the bird seed or whatever. And then at the lower level, it's all bagged and ready to go out to be distributed. So that was kind of an interesting tour. He said, now to the north of us is a building that had been a flour mill. He said in 1900, our first order for flour was from the Colorado State Hospital. It was for 30,000 pounds of flour. And the price tag was $1,200. And that was right about 1900. So they were off to a good start, wouldn't you think? Well, he took me down and we looked in the basement. He showed me a water line of 9.5 feet that had resulted from the flood. And he said, you can see Mr. Sweeney was really very smart to have moved. Well, it changed hands several times, and now, of course, it's out of business. But maybe at some point it will be another feed store. We don't know. And now I'd like to take you over to Vegas Shoes. Let's go on over to Vegas. That's over on the 400 block on Northern. Part of my reason for my travel today and my shopping tour, we're getting ready to celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. And so I had various things that I wanted to make arrangements for during this shopping trip. One of which was to drop off my very pointy-toed wedding shoes. They had those really tiny little heels they had worn down, and I wanted to wear those for the reenactment of our service that we were going to have in several weeks. Got over to Vegas and opened the door to the smell of leather. Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful smell. It was, and then I could hear a sewing machine going in the background. And a very nice man came up and introduced himself, and I told him why I was there. And he told me he was Bill Vega. I said, well, then you're part of the family. And he said, oh, yes. He said, last year in 1919, we celebrated our 100th anniversary. I said, well, do you have a minute to tell me a little bit about how all this came about? He said, sure. He said, my great grandpa came from Hungary and brought his son along with him. And it just so happened that the son had learned how to repair shoes in Hungary. Well, great grandpa takes a job with one of the mining companies down around Trinidad, and he's killed in a mining accident. So then his son decides to come up to Pueblo and open up the shoe shop in 1919. And then his son joined the group, and he said, that would have been my dad. And he said something funny about my dad. He said he always carried shoe nails between his lips, just ready to grab one and to pound into a shoe. He said, I always worried that he was going to swallow those nails. Never did. But, and I said to him, well, has the shoe business changed any over the years? And he said, well, yes and no. He said, probably the shoes that you have on could not be rehealed or sold because they were all made in one piece. But the Birkenstocks and the cowboy boots, they keep coming back because people get so used to the wonderful feel and they don't want to give up those shoes. And I said, well, thanks for all the information. I'll be back to get my shoes in a few days. Now I'm off to Zolzman's Bakery over there on Abriendo. Otto Zolzman came from, you can probably guess, came from Germany. He came in 1898. He bought this little tiny storefront, as you can see, And it's tucked literally in a neighborhood with small uh, houses around it. Many of those people worked at the steel mill. And at that time, the women were at home uh, and looking after the family's welfare. Otto had the ovens in the basement. He was able to do all of his baking down there. And his specialties were, at that time, Vienna bread and breadsticks. Plus, he might have had a special something each week. Try to visualize this. He had a little horse drawn cart, and he would go around the neighborhood. He may have even had a little bell that he was ringing to let people know that he was making the rounds. And the little housewives would come out and get things from his cart. Well, as I walked into Zolzman's that day, the smell of freshly baked bread was just, oh, you all know what that smells like. It's just, there's nothing better. And I was looking at these beautiful lighted glass cases with all the wonderful baked goods. And the reason I had stopped there is that I wanted to get wedding cookies and pizzelles for our gathering for the party. While I was looking and trying to decide, a man came in, walked over from the neighborhood, and he said, "My wife just put on a batch of chicken soup." He said, "I think a loaf of Vienna bread would really be good with that." So he bought the bread and he went off back home. Several minutes later, an older looking lady came in and she said, "I want a dozen of those big peanut butter cookies. The grandkids are coming over after school for cookies and milk." And I thought, this truly is a little neighborhood business. It's just delightful. So I finally made up my mind what I needed to order. And then I wanted to take something home because I thought this would be, kind of fun to surprise my husband. So I took home a freshly baked peach pie. Well, now it's time. After all this talk about food, I was getting hungry, and I had made arrangements with a friend to meet over at Gus's neighborhood bar. Gus is over on Mesa and Elm. Many of you probably either heard about Gus's or you have been there. Gus Maciotra came to the United States from Sicily as a 14-year-old, and he went to work for the steel mill at that age, before child labor laws and all of that, as you can well imagine. He then bought this building on the corner, which had been a church, made it into his home, and then he made it into a grocery store, and then ultimately it became Gus's bar. Gus has quite a reputation because right after Prohibition in 1933, he got all kinds of awards for selling the most beer per square foot. Now that's quite a distinction, don't you agree? The National Geographic wrote him up. He was in the Guinness Book of World Record. He got all kinds of acclaim because he had what was called a twofer. It was a big, tall glass of beer with a shot of whiskey in it. And as it was happening back at that time, the steelworkers often would stop at Gus's after their shift and have a beer and probably tell a story or two. But I was not there for the twofer. I was there to have what's called their Dutch lunch. Have any of you had the Dutch lunch? It's just, it's tradition. They give you a napkin, and on a paper plate, they give you slices of white bread and probably provolone cheese and some kind of salami and ham and maybe a little green or red chili. And you make your own sandwich. Nothing fancy, but they've sold, I don't know how many of those over the years. It has been quite a tradition. And the wall, when you walk in, there's red and white tiles on the floor and on the ceiling. Uh, there's this long bar that parallels the side of the room. It's just a happy place, and pictures of Gus everywhere. So it's been quite a tradition. And back in those days, you could send your son with a pail over to the side window of the building and get it filled up with beer, and he'd carry it home. Now that's the way things were. Well, after our Dutch lunch, and we had a chance to talk with Gino, it was time for us to go. But I will bring you up to date by saying that the Maciotra family did sell the business to another Italian family within this past year. And now we're going to go over to Fox's garden shop. Fox's down there on South Santa Fe. It was opened up in 1952 by Elaine and Earl Fox. I was stopping there because I wanted to decide on the flowers for our party. So I met with Gary Wade is now the owner. He's the grandson of the family. And his wife was there, and I just decided to talk with her about flowers. And we decided to get white and yellow chrysanthemums. Now, Gary is the man to go see if you want good advice. Every Wednesday in the Pueblo Chieftain, he has an ad that's about that big, and it will give you the advice for the week. If the aphids are eating your plants, he has a solution for that. If you need to know how to kill fairy ring in your lawn, he's the place to go. So anyway, got my order in for the flowers, and now we're going to go over to Clark's Spring Water on Clark Street, right around the corner from Fox's. Eric Clark is the 5th generation, and he happened to be a schoolmate of our boys. And I wanted to stop there to get my 5-gallon jug of water refilled. And I asked Eric when I was there, if he could show me around. And of course, he was more than happy to do that. But they started their business in 1879. 5 generations in the family. And it's quite a story. Silas came to Pueblo. He had been a successful oil man on the East Coast. He came he was kind of restless, came out west, ended up in Pueblo, started drilling for what he thought was oil, and it turned out to be water. He got down 1,400 feet and hit water, pure Rocky Mountain spring water that comes from Wetmore to the west of us. And there's just enough of a slope on the terrain that water, once it was tapped, has been flowing at 80 gallons a minute ever since. I had Eric repeat that to me. I said, I can't believe that. He said, yes, 80 gallons a minute. So that was quite a revelation for Silas. And he set up a little bathhouse just for the fun of it. His son, Orson, now decides that he is going to oversee the building of a very large sanatorium. This was the day when many people were getting tuberculosis, TB, and the only treatment we had for it was sunshine, fresh air, and they thought that this wonderful, pure Rocky Mountain spring water would really be a benefit. The pictures, the building no longer exists, which is really too bad because the pictures show it as about a 3-story large brick building with a big front porch and people sitting out on the porch or out on the lawn recovering probably from TB. They had a masseuse, they had a doctor on call. It became quite an amazing place. Well, then his son, Malcolm, became known as the Smiling Malcolm. Malcolm set up a delivery system where he, on a horse-drawn cart, would deliver these great big jugs of water. And he did that for over 60 years. Imagine, through the Dust Bowl, the Depression, and who knows what else was happening in our country. He was really quite a busy man. Well, then we come to William, which would be Eric's father, and he decided to modernize the operation. He not computerized, but he set up on a very efficient, streamlined system, and then able to have a good filing system. And they also built a 5,000-gallon holding container for the water. So now they had a place to put this free-flowing water. Then Eric finished school out here at the university in 1988, and he'd gotten all the computer information that was necessary to run a business, and then he joined and set everything up to speed on the computer. He was in business with his dad for a few years, and then his dad passed away in 1912. So, but Eric is still there, but Eric has no heirs. So I don't know what's going to happen when he steps down. We'll just have to see. But it's a small company. You'll see these green and white trucks around the neighborhood. They have 4 trucks, 6 people, and this has lasted all that time. So I got my nice fresh bottle of 5 gallons of water, and now we're going to go over to Store Cleaners. It's downtown on 7th. Store has been in business since 1913. I brought in my wedding dress because I wanted it to be dry cleaned. And yes, I can still wear it. So I wanted to wear it for our service. A very friendly gal greeted me, and her name was Sally. And I told her, of course, what I wanted. And then I said, Sally, how long have you been here? How long have you worked? She said, I've been here 16 years. I said, well, what keeps you here? What's special? She said, the people. I get to see families. They come back in every so often. We catch up on the news. It's just like one big family. And it truly is. The original owners, the stores, did sell, and it belongs to other people now, but it still has that special feeling. I said, has the dry cleaning business changed any over the years? She said, yes and no. She said, we still do the traditional kinds of cleaning, refurbishing your dress, and we do blankets and wool, whatever. We still do repairs. We still do treatment for smoke damage. The big difference is draperies. The window treatments today are so different from what they were when we had draperies. So that's the big difference. And she said, since you're so interested in our store, I have to tell you that in 2014, we got the Chamber of Commerce Small Business of the Year award. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. I said, well, I'll see you when my dress is ready to be picked up. And now we are going over to the First Congregational Church over on Jackson and Evans. I wanted to meet with the minister and the choir director and organist to make, again, arrangements for our gathering. That building was built in 1889, and it is beautiful Beulah red sandstone. As you can see, it's just a very lovely, lovely stone. Try to imagine how many wagon loads of stone it must have taken, because you're just seeing part of the building in this picture. There's a whole another side to it. Uh, Many, many, many trips, and all by horse-drawn wagon. They purchased the property from the CF&I, and it was patterned after an English country chapel. Now, uh, the architect wanted to put in Tiffany stained glass windows. They were a very expensive addition to that building. Back then, it was $300 extra in 1889. And I have this funny feeling that maybe there were no other stained glass Tiffany windows west of the Mississippi before this time. It was really quite special. And then several years later, they installed a pipe organ, 600 and I don't know, 70 some pipes, from these little bitty 4-inch ones to the 8-foot high pipes. And that added a considerable expense, almost $3,000 back in the 1920s. So you can see that that was an addition that they felt was wonderful. The interior has a slope into the sanctuary, so that the seating is really very, very convenient. A lovely hardwood floor. And then that stained glass, there's a rose window that is right up behind the altar, and it's just magnificent. Beautiful, beautiful church. It had several problems. In 2007, an arson-related fire did a lot of damage into the flooring in the sanctuary. And then that same year, we had one of our famous hailstorms, and they had to work on the roof. But it's a lovely facility, and they had added a special wing called the Mayflower Room, and that's where we'll be holding our reception after this church service. I was glad to get those arrangements made, and now we're going to go over to Gagliano's little grocery store. Again, tucked in the middle of this little neighborhood, just down the street from Gus's on Elm. The Gaglianos came in 1921. I don't know whether they came before the flood or after the flood, but they've been here ever since. And Tony and Josephine now are the children, and they are running the store with their daughter, Bonnie, and then their son is in charge of the meat market part. I had originally thought I wanted just to get some pork sausage and stop there because it's so good. But when I talked to Bonnie, because I was asking her a few questions and she seemed happy to tell about the business, I found out that what a wonderful lasagna cook their mother was, chef. And I decided that I'd better order some of that lasagna for our party too. So I made those kinds of arrangements, and then I know that I would be back, in several weeks to pick these things up. But I said, well, you've stayed in business all these years. You're a small little place, and I said the competition has gotten so great with box stores and things. What do you attribute this to? And she said, well, we try to listen to our customers. If they want a special kind of olive and we can't buy it anywhere, we'll send back to Italy to get it, or sauces and things like that. So they've tried to be very sensitive to what the neighborhood and the Italian people want. Well, this had been quite a shopping day, and I was getting kind of tired, and I was ready to go home. I get home, my husband looks at me and he says, "You look too tired." to cook dinner tonight. Why don't we go to the mill stop?" And I said, "Oh, that is a wonderful idea." So over to the mill stop we go, over on Bay State near the west parking lot for the CF&I. The original owner had sold it in 1982, but one of the things that he supplied to the steel mill was box lunches when they were on overtime. But I guess he decided it was time for him to step down. So the Maras family bought it, 1982. Alfonso and Estella and their 11 children. Now, Alfonso was definitely the man of the house with definite ideas. He held down 2 full-time jobs, and Estella, I'm sure, was just trying to keep things going at home. But she was a busy lady. But his plan was for, as those children were able, they were all to be helping in the store. And that holds true today. We have 2 of them in the brothers in the kitchen doing the cooking. We have some of the wait staff. Some of them are out in front greeting customers. We have one of the daughters who is to the buyer. It's a real family business. And another way that Alfonso asserted himself, he said, "Now, we work hard, and we're going to take off 2 weeks at Christmas time. We're going to close the store, and we're going to be enjoying the holidays. And then in July, we are going to take off 2 weeks, and we are going to do a family camping time." And the kids said, "Oh, Dad, this is just going to ruin the business." Dad was right. Every time they reopened, it was just like they'd never been closed. And I don't know if you've ever been to the mill stop, but sometimes you see people standing outside waiting to get in because it's not a big place. And fortunately for us, we were able to sit down and wait just a very few minutes. Went to our table. A very friendly gal by the name of Marianne was the waitress. And I said, "Marianne, how long have you been here?" She said, 18 years. She said, "I'm not family, but I'm like family." I said, "Well, what keeps you here?" You can guess. The people, the families. We just get such a kick out of seeing the little ones come in and hearing about all of the things that the families are involved in. And so she said, "I really don't want to work anywhere else." Well, I ordered a chicken burrito smothered with green chili, and my husband ordered a stuffed sopapilla. It was a delicious, delicious meal. And we went away very content. Now, on the way home, I got to thinking about all the stops that I'd made today. And what a precious gift all these immigrants have given to our community. You know, we had someone from Hungary, we had someone from Sicily, from Naples, Italy, from Germany, from Mexico. These are treasures, and I think we in Pueblo should feel so grateful and try to give them business to keep them here forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jane. I have just thoroughly gotten an education about these wonderful businesses that have been the cornerstones of the Pueblo community for such a long time. And I posted a comment because I couldn't help myself that all of these businesses are in my neighborhood, and because of being here today, listening to you talk about them and your visits, I had gotten such a much more deeper appreciation and understanding for the longevity of these businesses and how important they are and inspiring to new small businesses, and the fact that they are still thriving in Pueblo through all these years and all of the turmoil that Pueblo has experienced is extremely inspirational. So I just want to thank you again today for being here, Jane, and to sharing your stories with us. And I really look forward to the next time you come by here and share a storyteller with us, a Pueblo story, and hopefully invite members of the Pueblo Storytellers group to share their stories with us as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. And again, you can stream this program on our Pueblo City County Library Facebook page, on the YouTube page for Pueblo City County Library, and various Facebook pages and YouTube pages that are part of the library district. Thank you again so much, Jane, and we look forward to seeing you again. And thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.